Good afternoon, brothers and sisters. We have had quite a fantastic, let me say, pre-broadcast in understanding that the ancestors are working with us. They are with us, and we have a great program for you. I'm not going to use any of this time talking. I'm just going to bring you Dr. Evandra, Catherine, and let her introduce our program today. And I'm going to move out of the way. Thank you, Dr. Evandra.
You're welcome, Minister Brown. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for your patience. It's appreciated. We're going to hop into this show. A lot of you all have been waiting. The impetus from this show was resulted from a lot of killings of youth and children and families across the country in several different states, particularly at the end of March into April, but we know it happens all the time. And so I had a discussion about why are our sons killing the community, because in Richmond, Virginia, there were a drive-by shooting. 5 individuals were hit with bullets, but a mother and her 3-month-old were who died. And so I woke up out of my sleep with the ancestors that gave me the title of the topic, and it was Mothers, Why Are Our Sons Killing Up the Community? And so the work that I do day to day is looking at the emotional development and the humanization of young children birth to 8, particularly preschool age children. And so I wanted to get into the reasons why we do what we do and maybe what affects our behaviors. And Dr. Nichols' work and Dr. Degruy's work perfectly dovetails into this conversation of our African behaviors and how we're killing the community. And so without further explanation, I would love for Dr. Nichols and Degruy to briefly introduce yourselves. And then Dr. Nichols, you can roll right into your work on African axiology after the introductions.
Okay, I'm Dr. Edwin Nichols. I'm a clinical industrial psychologist, and I have developed a paradigm which is called the philosophical aspects of cultural difference. And the purpose of that is to look at the very essence of ethnic difference. Dr. Degruy?
Hello, I am Dr. Joy Degruy, pupil of Dr. Edwin Nichols, and I advance the theory of post-traumatic slave syndrome, America's legacy of enduring injury and healing, with a specific emphasis on violence and specifically African-American male youth violence.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. And so Dr. Nichols, go ahead, take the floor.
All right. In the paradigm in which I've developed, I look at all the ethnic groups, but we want to talk primarily about our own ethnic group. In our ethnic groups, the highest value lies in the relationship. So if you can see my hands, if the highest value lies in the relationship, we see ourselves to be equal to each other. That's the basic premise from which our African ancestry initiates itself. Women and men are equal in this environment because a woman can do anything that a man can do in terms of getting her own food, her own shelter, her own safety, and things like that. So there was no difference in what a man could do and a woman could do by themselves if they had to. So the highest value is in the relationship. If the highest value is in the relationship, and you do something that treats me as less than equal, you have treated me with disrespect, and that destroys the relationship. So the young Black men in our community have this value system where the highest value is in the relationship. Now, if you do something that treats me as less than equal, then in the vernacular, that's called dissing or any other names where you treat someone less than equal, and that destroys the relationship. And then there's retaliation for the destroyed relationship. That is the philosophical framework from which we work in trying to understand this. Now, in addition to that, we have some realities. Most recently, we have found that when we look at the young men who are apprehended and those who were killed into their blood system, we find lead, disproportionate amounts of lead. And when lead goes into a system, it affects the brain, the neurons, and so on. So now where is the lead coming from? The lead is in the paint because they live in these old ghetto houses. It also is in the plumbing. Many of these houses have plumbing that have spaces of it that are lead. And this lead leaches into the water supply, and then it's into the body. So one of the things that we want to look at is the physiological issues of substances in the body that create these issues. Another part of it, which Dr. Degruy will discuss, is that we now know that through epigenetics, that trauma is carried in the genes and can manifest itself in different generations and different patterns. Therefore, if you have stressors, which says the environment in which the child grows, whether they're here in Washington, D.C., at one time at Howard University, we had support groups for grandmothers, 30 and younger. Now, if you're a grandmother 30 and younger, what life experiences have you had? And you're already a grandmother. And what experience has your child had who is now a mother? So we have some generational things that go where children aren't as valued, as cared for, as nurtured as they might be. And then you have these other substances within their system that are destructive and cause brain injury. And therefore, you now begin to see a person that is physically as well as emotionally disturbed, destroyed, mistreated. And now they come out into the open with the value system of the highest value lies in the relationship, and someone diss them, and you say, why would you kill your cousin, brother, best friend? Well, man, he dissed me, he disrespected me. And of course, in the last century, with the most important song sung by Aretha Franklin was respect. So it's a very powerful tool that we have in our basket of values. So that is the extent to which the philosophical and some of the physiological things are manifested in the young men that you see today killing each other because they feel that they have been disrespected from the axiological perspective. And now I want to turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Degruy, who will give you greater insights, and then we'll have a kind of summary discussion toward the end.
All righty then. Okay. Well, thank you for that introduction. And in fact, I was writing down notes because I'm always writing notes when Dr. Nichols is speaking. That's been my whole life, sneaking in and taking notes. But I want to speak specifically, my area of expertise, as I looked at my research, was around this whole issue of violence. So I want to kind of speak to that as much as I can, as quickly. So I'm going to share the screen. And let's see if it magically does what it's supposed to do. All right. Let's see if that works. So do you see what I see?
We see what you see. Yes.
Excellent. Look at that. It's like magic. All right. So I want to start actually with another slide. Okay, that wasn't the slide. We escaped from there and wonder what happened to the slide. Okay, the slide we want to start with is this slide. Okay. And of course, my work is based upon the literally working as a student and eventually as an associate of Dr. Nichols. I actually created an evidence-based model. Now I've created 2 evidence-based models for how to work with African-American people and other people of color in community as individuals and within systems. And of course, I principally looked at this notion of axiology and the idea that the highest value lies in the relationship between people as it relates to people of African descent. So again, understand that the backdrop, the foundation upon which I was building my model, which was eventually evaluated, tested, measured, was based on the philosophical aspects of cultural difference. So my research looked at the dependent variable here of violence. And if someone could mute themselves, because I can hear noise, it would be a little easier. Okay, so what this diagram is showing is my research, and I want to also bring into this conversation that there is a difference in the behavior and the intent and the motivation for violence now. It's different, even though I was dealing with violence among African American male youth in the early 2000s. What we are dealing with now is violence, but what is motivating that violence, I would submit to you, is a bit different. And we have to always look at things in terms of the local context, right? So again, this was my research. I'm going to blend them to speak to the fact that not only are we looking at African American male youth violence, we're looking at African American female youth violence, which is also a growing phenomenon in African American communities and other communities of color. So here we have my dependent variable is violence, and this is the use of violence. So what I'm trying to predict is the use of violence among African American male youth, 100 of whom were incarcerated at the time between the ages of roughly 14 and 20, and 100 of whom were involved in culture-specific activities, same socioeconomics, same neighborhoods, same zip codes. The only thing different is one group was being positively racially socialized. I'm going to get to that. Okay, so here are stress variables over here. These two, violence witnessing and victimization, are baseline variables. We already know the more of this, more violence victimization, more violence witnessing. Here you have plus signs. The more likely folks will be violent. You with me? Okay. So the last scale that I used, you working with these 200 African American male youth, 100 incarcerated, 100 that were not, were these various scales. The fourth one, or actually the fifth one that was written was mine. I wrote this scale, but I'll get to that. One was called the Daily Urban Hassle Scale. And I put that in there because, again, I want to understand the cultural context here. I'm not just interested in violence for violence sake on every level. I wanted to know what Black has to do with it, okay? So I'm now looking at daily urban hassles. What are daily urban hassles? Now, my hypothesis is the more of these, you have another plus sign here, the more likely you're going to have violence. So what is a daily urban hassle? Do you hear gunshots in your neighborhood? Do you hear sirens? Do people approach you trying to sell you drugs or other things? Do you try to find a safer route home from work or school? That is a daily urban hassle that nobody looks at, okay? And my hypothesis is that the more of that, the more violence. Okay, so now we have to, I want to connect historical realities as it relates to historical trauma in people of African descent, starting with slavery. I also want to connect what the Black reality is. How does our axiology play into this? So first we look at racial socialization. Now I'm saying that the more positively racially socialized Black youth are, the less likely they'll be violent. Okay. And now what does it mean to be positively racially socialized? So let me find that particular, I think I put it in here somewhere at the end. Sorry. Okay. So this is Dr. Howard Stevenson's work. He postulated that racial socialization is one of the ways that cultural values are transmitted and can provide children with a more positive perception of themselves. Stevenson and others concluded that racism is an intrinsic part of the fabric of American society that cannot be ignored, and that racial socialization by parents can act as a protective factor for their children. When one's group has been stigmatized by the majority culture's negative appraisals, it is encouraging for African-American youth to be told by members of their own group that the assessment of the dominant culture is fueled by inaccuracies and bias, and caution not to internalize its perception. Within the group, youth are given reassurance through acknowledgement of the strengths and accomplishments of their culture. Again, so now when we go all the way back to that chart, I'm saying you're going to have less violence. Then the last one speaks so directly to what Dr. Nichols said. And Dr. Nichols talked about this whole idea of disrespect. Now, just so that we can unpack this notion for a moment, I wanted to know, before I wrote the scale, I was talking to kids in the community. I was going to basketball games. I was at the barbershops. I was everywhere. And I was asking Black males of every background from all over the place what respect meant. I said, what does respect mean? Right. And, they kind of were giving me their perspective. And then I asked them, I said, and and I would ask them the other question, why do you think there's so much violence? And they inevitably would say, well, you diss somebody, you diss somebody. And they kept saying it over and over again, regardless of where they were. And I wanted to kind of know what they meant by that. What is respect? So when I asked Black males what respect meant, listen carefully. They said a sense of worth, a sense of value. They connected respect with their intrinsic sense of value as human beings and worth. When I asked white males, my colleagues at the university where I taught for 20 years, I asked various people, friends, various folks, what respect meant to them that were white. And they would say a sense of earned regard. Now, that's a really interesting difference, right? This is a regard that people are going to regard me in a way that I have earned. You're staying with me. But when I talk to these Black males, young and old, it's a sense of worth far beyond the epidermis. Now, why that is, that's a whole nother talk we would have to give. And I would submit to you that having been marginalized, having been dehumanized, having been terrorized as Black males, that has something to do with this. We can't ignore that marginalization. And these young men, all 200, wrote in longhand what they believe respect they deserved from peers, family, from authority and institutions. And their perception of being disrespected was directly linked to their Blackness. So long story short, did a stepwise linear regression analysis. All my hypotheses were correct and statistically significant, which means that these were strong. The only qualitative part of this were two open-ended questions that I asked them. If you or your friends ever were disrespected, why do you think it happened? And why do you think someone like you might be disrespected? The majority of the response was about being Black, about slavery, about history, about white fear, about white superiority. All of those things are what came out. So I asked you, they believe that disrespect is connected to their Blackness. How long will they be Black? So how long then, real or perceived, will they be disrespected? And so as I looked at that and I unpacked what the word respect means, stay with me. Respect literally means, spect is where we get the word spectacle. So when we go back to the origins of the word, we get spectacle, which is to look or see. Re means again. So look at me again. Respect me, look again. It was such a powerful reality spiritually, culturally, that they were saying, look again at me, give me a chance. Look at me with a different eye. And so it was very interesting. So when we move forward with this, how much time do I have, friends? I know I'm covering a lot. I don't want to.
Go ahead. You got about 10 more minutes. Take your time.
Okay, I can do it. So I want to put this in a context because we're talking very often, it's between the ears. And this is really heart work. It's going to require heart work for us to impact and change what we see happening, which is what I consider victim perpetuated suicide. What I'm seeing is, one of those deliberate, death by police, all these various things. But in reality, we're looking at something far deeper. We're looking at post-traumatic. So anyway, on my way to school, I saw a young brother on a crowded N train. This is a true story by a friend of mine, Rajan Prasad. On my way to school, I saw a young brother on a crowded N train eating sunflower seeds. Between his legs laid a mound of wet, disgusting sunflower shells that he kept enlarging by spitting on the floor. Though visibly frustrated and disgusted by his behavior, no one would dare challenge his position. An older white man motioned to him to stop spitting the seeds on the floor. In response, he spat the seeds with much more animation than before, while effortlessly trying to stare fear into the old man. I made eye contact with the young man, and he said, "What?" And then I said, "What?" Believe me, in the world of powerlessness, this is enough for a shootout. He leered at me and then said, "I thought so." And I responded with my generation's favorite confrontation closer, "Whatever." Now we were both staring, sneering, flexing, profiling, and posturing at each other, refusing to yield the power we thought we had, creating two more powerless brothers in a confrontation over bullshit. Two intellectual amputees looking for the upper hand while mentally handcuffed. I don't know that anyone has ever been able to articulate that reality, that those of us that live here that are African Americans, those of us that are of African descent, that have seen these contests play out over and over again in the streets. No one has ever said it quite this way and captured what is really going on here and why this issue of respect becomes so important. And again, understanding our roots, where the highest value is the relationship, and then see the assault for over 400 years on that relationship, the assault on our ability to even have a level of stability, even in poverty, to be able to stand on the piece of whatever we have together and get a sense of continuity and grace, a sense of future, a trajectory towards something better. We have to be able to fold those things in to understand why this issue of respect. When you don't have anything, how do you get it? Well, one way that I can make you instantly respect me is to make you fear me. And so again, there's a lot to this that we certainly can't cover in this, but I wanted to deal with another piece to this that I think is important. I'm trying to figure out where I want to go. Okay. Ooh, let me see. I guess I have to go here because I'm not going to have time to cover both, but we really need to look at the issue of cortisol, stress-related hormone that naturally occurs in the body, which we have information and literature, data, and scientific evidence that suggests that Black people deal with levels of stress that have never been dealt with before. We've normalized the excessive levels of stress, which means we have excessive levels of cortisol, which means that people live in fight or flight. It reduces our life expectancy. There's a lot connected to that I can't cover today. But let's talk about development so we can appreciate what's happening with youth. And I'm not saying Black youth. I'm saying Black youth and Black female youth as well, because this is a growing trend. And trust me, to shoot someone from halfway across the street or from a couple of 100 yards is different than stabbing someone, which is far more violent, which a lot of females are doing. Just want you to know that. Okay. I want you to pay attention to the ages 6 through 11. It's called middle childhood, according to Erickson. And this is just one perspective of this development. What you're looking at are, I'm not all that interested in how he's naming them, because it's a little different from what my experience of 30 years working with young men and women have said. So basically, we're looking at a task of development. You know how you look at a child from birth to 18 months, there's certain tasks of development that we have expectation by a certain age you will receive. What we know is that Black youth are always ahead of white youth when it comes to these developmental stages. They'll say, well, they should be turning over now. I said, turning over? Hell, they sitting up and making breakfast. What you talking about? Black kids are always 1 to 3 months ahead of white kids developmentally, which makes you have to question how we end up behind, right? When we always are ahead. So when we start looking at this age, 6 to 11 years, this becomes important as we talk about this topic of violence. The task of development is to have a unfavorable or favorable outcome as a result of your sense of initiative, right? A sense of having attained autonomy, having confidence in oneself, having trust. All of those things should lead us to be able to matriculate through this level of development in a healthy way. Instead of feeling a sense of industry and efficacy, you feel inferiority. That's the negative outcome. The positive outcome is competence. Stay with me. Think about 6 to 11-year-olds, whether those feel competent and those who feel inadequate. I really wish I had more time to talk about this, but I don't. So now we have Piaget's stages of cognitive development, another theorist, that looked at hardwiring. In other words, what Piaget felt like is you cannot rush this, that some of it's in the hardwiring, that you can't, be where you're not. And so he looks at all these various stages. But once again, I'm going to look at the 7 to 11-year-olds. I want you to pay attention to this because this becomes very critical when we see what's going on in the world 2021. So concrete operations is that particular level of development, cognitive development. And this is what we're saying people should be able to think and learn and understand. This is learning through concepts and relationships and logical inferences. During this stage of development, children begin to understand social inferences. That is the act of making assumptions about what another person is feeling, thinking, and intending. Stop right there. I want you to think about this, particularly if you're a person of African descent. There was an ability you developed that no one taught you. And what we call as older Black folks is reading folks. In other words, you may have even been pre-verbal, but you can read the intent, you can read the body language of adults, even as small children. Now, what they're saying is this should happen between 7 and 11. This happens earlier with Black children. And I know it does, and you know it does, because nobody ever taught you this. But how did you develop it and so early? And this is where white people have a difficulty with Black children, because Black children can read your motive. So you may be talking and saying a bunch of stuff, and they're giving you the side eye because they know that you don't. Well, let's do the math. Kid comes home from school, predominantly white teachers, predominantly white females. Why did you get a C? Trey, why did you get a C in English? It's because my teacher doesn't like me. Stay with me. You said it. The kids say it today. They said it when I was a kid. They said it when Ed was a kid. My teacher doesn't like me. Why is that important based on Nichols' philosophical aspects of cultural difference? Where does the highest value lie? And I don't believe you like me. Do you understand how confounding, how devastating that is for a Black child? Okay, I'm rolling it up. So then you say, not only you at the act of making assumptions about what another is feeling, thinking, and intending, this is also where you learn social relationships. Look at this one. Understanding fairness, loyalty, respect for authority, concepts of legality and justice, social regulations, understanding social rules and conventions. I'm going to stop sharing. So here's why that becomes important. Here's why this becomes important. At a point in my development, when I'm supposed to be feeling trust and justice and fairness, I know you're not treating me fairly. I know you're not treating my father or my mother or my community or George Floyd fairly. And you want me to conform? Why should I? I mean, just do the math. This is a developmental stage where they're supposed to be able to conform to what they're told is a fair system, which they know is not fair. And then we punish them. We punish them for not leaning into it, saying, why should I trust you? I saw what you did. I see what you do to Black folks. Why should I conform? I'm going to just have to get mine. Because I know ain't nobody going to give it to me. I'm going to just have to get mine. And in addition to that, you know, again, this is such an important conversation. But the other thing I want to end with this, if we really want to know why it's going on, I'm a clinician. I'm also a researcher. We can't know if we don't talk to them. Hello, we can sit up here as social scientists and philosophers and everything else, but unless we say, hey, what's up? Because there's a whole nother paradigm happening different than the Crips and the Bloods of 20 years ago. We're not looking at the same thing. And that means that we got to lean into them. We've got to have such relationships, which have been compromised. We have to redevelop it, connect those relationships so we can establish what? Trust. So now you can tell me how you're walking through the world and why.
Dr. Thank you so much. And I know that you had so much to say, but this is just the carrot that we're dangling. We can come back and we can take as much time as we need to get through these topics and these different issues. So thank you for breaking that down. Before we move forward, I would like for Dr. Nichols to short up for those that are not familiar with your work or his work. If you could tell us how you sort of came to this development. So I've heard you speak about the object for white folk and how it started because of their need to have food and didn't have the number of months throughout the year. Whereas African folk, we had that time. And to sort of put that into context with your work about the African mother, who would see things, and then how the European mother, pregnant mother particularly, was seeing things happening in nature, and sort of bring that together for us so that folks that is not familiar with your work have an understanding of the difference between European axiology and African axiology and sort of its origins. And you can have about 10 minutes and 15 to walk through that if you need it.
Okay, well, axiology in classical philosophy is the study of values. And in order for me to understand myself and others, after a series of trying to be a conformist within the system, getting all the papers and all the documents and everything you're supposed to have, and still not getting the job, and the answer was because you're Black, I at first you think it's all pathology. They're all sociopaths. Well, that's not going to work. So I looked to the mother science to find some answers. I thought that if I could understand what was important to you, which is your value system, and that's axiology. If I knew how you solved problems, that's epistemology. And if I understood how you reason to an answer, which is logic, if I understood those three things about you, I would pretty much understand how to cope with you in the world of work or in any form of exchange and interaction. So I looked at the dominant culture, the European culture, and the European culture is the newest ethnic group on the planet. Okay? The reason being that people coming out of Africa went east into Asia Minor, on into Asia, and all the way into Korea and Japan. And you have cities in Korea that are 30,000 years old. But you only have the end of the last ice age, 20, maybe maximum 25,000 years ago, which meant that you could go to Italy, but you couldn't go into northern Italy, Switzerland, and Germany because it was all covered with ice from the glaciers. And so that movement out of Africa directly north was not possible until 25 or 20,000 years ago. Now, once you get there, you have to ask yourself the things I always ask in any of the cultures. What was necessary for that group of people to survive and thrive? Well, in Europe, you have only 3 months in which you can grow things. So you can plant seeds in the ground and grow a crop and have it. And that's only 3 months. So if it's only 3 months, then you have to ask yourself, what is necessary to survive next spring and thrive? It says that you have to plan for 9 months with no opportunity to grow food. So your planning involves a lot of things, like knowing when the growing season starts, knowing how long it's going to last, and then you have to store and preserve food to last for 9 months. Now, when you store and plan food for 9 months, the concept of sharing does not come into it. You see, the concept of sharing only comes with Christianity into Europe. Because if I have 10 bushels of food, 9 will last me the 9 months, and in case something happens, the 10th bushel. But if you come to me and say, oh, please give me that 10th bushel. Well, once I give you the 10th bushel, then you'll come back and either kill me or try to take what's from me, or you'll starve to death anyway. So why should I give it to you? Because I might need it at the end. So these are behaviors that you see in European culture. Now, the other part of that is the way women are seen. The women are seen based on their physical strength. So can a woman who is pregnant take care of herself? No, she can't. Can a woman who is not pregnant do all the things that a man can do in North Central Europe 20,000 years ago? And the answer is no, because they didn't have the physical strength. So you have a hierarchy in Europe starting very early. And a part of that hierarchy is because women knew things that men didn't know. They knew how to count and measure because of their menstrual and gestation cycles. They knew how to preserve food. And they had a pharmacopoeia that they, by watching animals, eating certain plants and so on, being able to cure illnesses, to have delivery more accommodating. In other words, a small goat or deer would nibble from this bush and then dilate and deliver. Well, there are a lot of things that they understood that men didn't understand because they were always out on the hunt or fighting other people to survive. Now, if that's the system in which you grow up, then things like a deadline are significant. When you go into an office and you don't turn a report in by the deadline, what does he say to you who missed the deadline? Well, in their culture, if you if you didn't get all the food you were supposed to in that 3 months space of time, you missed the deadline. You were dead. So in their culture, it only goes from A to B. There is no A prime or B prime. It doesn't work that way. Now let's go to Africa and see what happens there. How long is the growing season? 12 months. Can you find something to eat all 12 months of the time? Yes. If the sun is hot on you, can you build a shelter with palm leaves to keep the sun off of you? Yes. Would you freeze to death? No, won't freeze to death. I can have enough food. I can have enough that. So if you have enough food and shelter, and now let's see what women can do. Can women get their own food? Yeah, sure, just go pick it. If your husband says, get out, could you take palm leaves and make a shelter? Yes. If there's a snake crawling, it's going to bite your child and kill it. Is the snake dead or your child? The snake. Well, that means you can take care of yourself. So if we look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we're seeing that in this environment, Black women can provide their own food, their own shelter, and their own safety. So Black women are very close to self-actualization just by where they live and the environment in which they find themselves. Now, if women can be this independent of men, what then brings them together? What brings them together is mutual respect. There's that word respect again. So the mutual respect is what brings them together, and that is what forms bonds and relationships and what have you, that mutual respect. So when other people come into the picture, everyone is trying to work hard to maintain the relationship. And the highest value is in that relationship. That's the axiology. Now, it's very important to see the difference between the European and the African. The European has to plan, count, measure, all these different dependent variables in order to be alive next spring. All the things that they had to do just to be alive next spring are of no consequence in Africa. In Africa, all was provided. Everything was there. All you had to do is to develop a way to live in harmony with each other. And so what comes out of that is that there's a mutual respect between men and women, and the highest values in the relationship. Now, when you have that kind of situation, that's how we survive slavery. Because if the highest value is in the relationship and women independently can take care of themselves, here's your husband that is sold from Virginia down to South Carolina. Here you are as a woman left with your child. What daycare facilities were available for the enslaved woman in taking care of her child? It wasn't there. What does she do? She takes the child with her. Now, when you think in terms of that bonding, that closeness on the back of the mother, we now know that that's the neurophysiological development. Dr. Degruy was telling you about our children develop physiologically faster, neurophysiologically. Well, that's from that bonding of flush on flush being carried on the back. Now, old crazy Nichols, I was asking one of my friends who had studied at Oxford, I said, how do you know when the baby wants to urinate or defecate? You carrying it naked on your back? Can't they just, she said, oh, you're so silly, Edwin. I didn't know what she's talking about. I was silly because she says when the child is ready to urinate or defecate, you can feel the muscles tensing. When you feel the muscles tensing up, you remove the child from your back and you let it urinate or defecate on the side, wash it and put it back. Okay, now if there's that closeness in the bonding between the mother and the child, that's the security, that's knowing you're safe, all the things that are important that are built into the structure and the child rearing practices. Now, when you come to the United States, what are our child rearing practices what do they have to do with our reality today? Well, you have the mother that has to work and the father that has to work. Why? Because their combined income is less than the one white male working. So if both parents are outside working, who takes care of the children? Who does the bonding? Who is the closeness? Where's the warmth? Where's the neurophysiological development? It's failing. Well, who's guarding the child against eating paint or sucking on paint? Who's guarding the child in drinking water like in Flint, where the whole system has gone wrong? How do you do all these things? These children are not having the proper raising or the proper nurturing that they need in order to be successful. So now we have two groups of people, one where the highest value is in the object or the acquisition of the object, and we have another group of people where the highest value is in the relationship. Put the two groups together and one exploits the other, because in the European culture, it is, if you have a relationship, what is the end? What is the purpose? What are you going to get out of it? That's the object. So anytime I relate to you or have anything to do with you, my question is, what am I going to get out of it? Well, now with the socialization that our children see on public media, on television, and also on their computers, what are they seeing every day? They're seeing the acquisition of objects, the acquisition of objects. And if you don't have the objects, how do you get them? If you have no vehicle by which you can get all these wonderful things that you see on television, that you see in your social media, people going on vacations, buying suits, buying clothes, the shoes, everything, and you don't have it, how do you get it? What's available to you in your environment to help you to secure these things? Well, we know the drug dealers have lots of money, so you can hustle that way. We also know that certain forms of crime pay. We know that some people will use the system in order to survive. But within your environment, what is there to tell you that you are of worth and value? Remember what Dr. Degruy was telling you, the concept of being of worth and value. There's nothing in your environment that really stimulates you to that. Now, for my generation, and if I live to June 23rd, I'll be 90. So it's a long time ago, okay? The reality is the church, the Black church, was the place in which you were nurtured. It didn't matter how much nurturing you got at home or how little you got at home. You came to the church and you were nurtured and loved. And I used to play the piano. And the way I played the piano, I know how poorly I played now. But if you had told me the way the people in the church said, "Oh, Nichols, you're so wonderful," I thought I was a genius. I thought I could have played Chopin if I really needed to. So what I'm sharing with you is the nurturing of the community was there. It was an extended family. It was all these things were there to nurture you. So somebody was at work, somebody was there at home to do the nurturing. Okay. So again, what I'm sharing with you is that the systems that we had in place historically to provide for the children that are not being provided for now were in place. And unless we have some vehicle by which we can bring our children together and nurture them, then we lose them. We lose them.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nichols. That was absolutely perfect, phenomenal, and well said. And I think it perfectly ground Dr. Degruy's work and everything that she spoke to. We have about 20 minutes to bring this back together. And Dr. Degruy, I would love for you to bring what Dr. Nichols said back to your work and explain to us how post-traumatic slave syndrome plays a role in this neural development, these brain injuries, and sort of our children killing children. Because what we do also see beyond middle childhood is many of these suspects are between the ages of 18 and 25. And we know that these are just children themselves developmentally. And so can you really just speak to the children on children violence that we're not even seeing it as what that truly is?
So can you hear me?
Clearly.
Okay, good. Because, it's really weird. I didn't know I unmuted myself, but apparently I did. I think that Dr. Nichols spoke to it very early on when he started to kind of speak to this whole idea of children who have had children. For example, when we start looking at we have to pay attention to what's been going on, right? Like people have said, well, after slavery, Black folks, we had a sense of community. But you have to remember that racial terrorism and what we call serial forced displacement. Let me speak to that. So the first serial forced displacement was our movement being removed from Africa. That was the first one. And throughout all of the ravages and horrific, experiences of slavery where everything was confined, you didn't even own your own person. And then we had, okay, now you're free, great. And some people have some mythology that somehow, everything got balanced when slavery ended. And actually, in some ways, it got worse. For example, the lynchings, because of the fear of Black reprisal and white guilt and pathology, we've been cast as the evildoers that are going to kill all the white people. And we do a whole lot less harm to white people than we do to ourselves. So there's no evidence to suggest that anybody has decided, let's attack the white people who have done what they've done. Yet that is always the conversations all the way up to the Capitol, why we got to defend and protect ourselves. From whom? Right. So again, we have this phenomenon we have to look at it. That was followed by Jim Crow. Yeah, we're scared of you all. We don't like you. We feel like you're subhuman, whatever that is, separate but equal. It's still separate, isn't it? I mean, everybody also has this myth that somehow we coexist. I don't care where you are. You walk into any city in the United States and say, well, where are the Black folks? And somebody knows. Okay, which would suggest that separation is still existing. So they said, okay, we don't want you near us, but we're going to let you have an equal reality. We know it's never been equal. We know it's never been equal. You always know when you roll into the hood, right? If it was equal, then you wouldn't know that you ruled in the hood. And if you were once you're in the hood, what you realize immediately, I'm actually multitasking here because I'm not at home. Okay, so what ends up happening is you roll in and you go, wow. Instead of banks, you see check cashing places. You also see all the liquor stores because that's where the white people come to get their liquor. They don't have those liquor stores in their neighborhood. So we also know that you have police presence. I mean, there's all these dynamics that let you know you're in the hood. Right. So we went and then we built our own communities. We said, OK, y'all don't want us near you. We built, during segregation, and we know what happened to those. They were, wait a minute, they're prospering. We can't let that happen. And they literally bombed the cities because we want your money. We want your objects and we want you to spend them, more importantly, with us. Stay with me. So then we have, so then we have the illusion of inclusion. We all show up together and then we're finding out that we're still not quite on par. And then you start looking at, if you have a chance, look at a film. It's called Color Tax, right? When we were able, we didn't get the GI Bill, right? So we start looking at all of the things that were supposed to create and build wealth. It was non-existent. So then they realized that wasn't fair. So we said we can't have segregation. So then we had, okay, everybody's free to go wherever they want to go. Well, that was never true either, right? So now we have redlining. And then the people said, well, we can't, at least we can't say that anymore. And then we had urban renewal. These are all new words. And now we have gentrification. What does that produce? Serial forced displacement. What does serial forced displacement result in? Drum roll. Structural and interpersonal violence. So you break my leg and then you complain that I limp. So these things, and again, it's not one thing. There's a complexity of things that have gone into this. But what post-traumatic looks at is the historical context that brings us to where we are. People act like, oh my God, what's going on? Like, for example, the opioid all of a sudden, opioids is a problem. Why opioids have always existed in communities of color, right? My own brother had a heroin addiction. That ain't new. And nobody was saying stuff like help, not handcuffs. They started talking about help, not handcuffs, when white people got addicted to opioids. Why? Because of racism. Racism said, well, when a white person says they're in pain, we believe them. When a Black person says they're in pain, we don't believe them. That's not Dr. Joy's opinions. That's statistical evidence. So when we start looking at these issues, this problem that we're seeing, It's deeply married to our sense of who we are and how we move through the world. I have to look at your axiology to understand how you move through the world, whether that's a combination of ways. Nobody fits in a box. We know that. You only have to go down that road. This is about really recognizing the context of history and local history to understand what's going on. But it's not one thing now, is it? It's a multiplicity of things. And so what people do is they tend to do is throw money at something without really correcting the underlying problem, which is white supremacy. Okay, that's the underlying problem. I don't care what institution you're dealing with. I don't care. I have a PowerPoint I do. It's just called Who's Under the Sheets Now? Right? You think they went away? No, they wear judges' robes. They wear doctors' jackets. They are police officers. They're firefighters. They're teachers. That's the reality. So fixing this is not fixing them. They're not the pathology. These young people who are not really seeing a future for themselves, where they can have all the stuff that the world says you measure yourself by. Because like Dr. Nichols said, highest value lies in the object for Europeans, but the highest value lies in the object for so many youth who wear their worth, who believe their worth is somehow connected to what you have. And then we say to them, but you can't have it. And they're saying, well, if I can't have it, you can't either. And again, I don't want to simplify this because there's a lot to it. I studied this for years, only to find that it has mutated into something far worse. Now add COVID. Okay, add COVID and getting back to normal. I tell everybody I know, we don't need to go back to normal. Because normal means police use of deadly force and racial terrorism. Back to normal means disproportionality. Back to normal means a lack of equity and justice and fairness. That's back to normal. And these young people that had nothing to begin with have less now that it's being lifted again. Where do I go now? How do I find dignity and respect and value? It's not an excuse. It's helping us understand how people move through the world, which means ultimately we got to sit down with them and go, hey, what we got going on? It's not pathologizing people. It's not the people. It's the systems that are producing the problems that are resulting in what we're seeing. And I want everyone to know that we've got to look at these systems and not look at them. Now, do we have to hold them accountable and bring some peace into our communities? Of course. But let's lean into this properly. Let's lean into it with love. Let's lean into it with understanding before we act and decide how we're going to fix it. And I hope that makes sense because I'm dying to. I'm actually part of what I'm doing right now is that very thing because I'm working with people who are working directly on the ground with these young folks. Yesterday, my friend buried his son. So this is real for me. He buried his son yesterday as a result of this violence. Okay. So these are things that I have a real desire and need to get to, but I need to understand why they're killing themselves just like you do, but I have to talk to them. So I'm going to give you all the information I've learned over the years, but what is the local reality? What is the historical context for the places that this is happening? Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, Portland, Oregon. What's the story? Atlanta. So there's a lot, but I'm asking everybody to dig in, roll up your sleeves and get involved in this because again, we're all one people.
Yes. And Dr. Degruy, thank you so much because you answered the question of this show perfectly about us pathologizing our issues in our neighborhoods and communities where we have to all just jump in. And I was so thankful for you to bring in the solution as you were summarizing because many of us here have been listening to us on YouTube. Those are in the comments. They always want to know what are the solutions? How do we fix the problem? And it's us coming together and understanding that the systems aren't working for us. And in this last 10 minutes that we have left, we can go ahead and start the closing of the topic. And we can definitely come back and do a part 2 where you can talk more about your work in depth and really explain some of these nuances that we see. But Darrell, if you could bring us all back in together and both Dr. Nichols and Dr. Degruy, if you guys could close us out with some tangible solutions that people can do in their community. I know going out and talking to folk is one of the things that you mentioned, Dr. Degruy. I also think the bringing back the Black family and focusing on that relationship of the Black family, and having grandmothers that are not 30 years old and seasoned grandmothers that can be there and pass down knowledge. But in these last few moments, we can definitely work into the closing.
I have one request for Dr. Degruy. We're talking about how there's an imprint from the society when we talk about systemic institutional white racism. She has a picture in her portfolio there of children in daycare, and it's lunchtime and they're being fed. Have you shown that to them?
You're muted, Dr. Degruy.
I'm not.
Can you show it again? It was one of the pictures in your slide.
I skipped it because I knew I couldn't get to it.
It's okay. Go ahead and throw it back up there if you can.
No,
I don't mind.
I think that tells them so very much about how vigilant we must be in order to protect our children, and how early these imprints are made of you are less than, you're not as good as.
Let me find it again. I actually saved it as something different because it was a unique slide. Here it is. Okay. I called it violence. Let me get back to sharing. It's a process, it takes me a while. Okay. Let's see. You see it?
No, not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Let me see. That's not the right one. Let me see the right one. It's called violence. Oh, that's what it is. Okay. Is it showing? All right. Okay, there it is. All right. Let me see if I have it all there. There it is. So that's the slide. Now I'm gonna see if it'll share, if it works this time. So now I need to share screen. So tell me when you can see that.
There, we can see it now.
Okay, so this happened April 12th, 2021. And I want you to look at this very closely because I'm very, of course, Dr. Nichols is speaking to what he knows, and I do know clinically what's going on in terms of the development of these children. These are preschoolers. That means they're between 3 and 4 years old. That's who's in this room. This was captured when a Black couple decided, because there are cameras within the preschool so you can see the work that your kids are doing. These Black parents decided to check, and when they checked, this was a picture that went viral. And you notice that every Black child is without a plate in front of them. Every Black child, and every white child has a plate of food. That is what you're seeing right here. What's important to understand, remember I said to you that Black children have an ability to read behavior earlier than others. And so these children, the Black children, what happens here is all these children are innocent, all of them. The adults are not. But these children are innocent and they're learning here. They're learning something. The white children are learning, I'm special. And I know I'm special and at least more special than these Black children. Are you following me? Nothing more than that, maybe. We're just special. We don't know why we're special yet. Or maybe, we don't have any other pictures of, and we don't know what the teachers have been telling them, right? This is only one shot. But the Black children are learning something too. And what gets internalized here is shame and fear. What have I done wrong? What is wrong with us that they are not giving us the food? Are you following me? Because these children didn't go home and tell their parents, only the Black children don't get fed, or I don't get fed, but the other kids do. Why are they not telling them that? You have to understand developmentally where they are and what they internalize. And what they internalize at this age is that there is something wrong with me. I've done something bad. I will get in trouble. Are you hearing me? It's really important. And this is how early white supremacy is showing up. Now, nobody thought to look into the preschool, but my question was, what else are they doing to these children? What else? What other messages are they doing to hurt the minds and hearts of all of these children? And because of that, when we start looking at this dynamic of how and what we need to do. Well, my first thought is, I'm gonna quit sharing here, but my first thought is, we've got to vet teachers. We have to hold people accountable. Don't put people in front of your children because they say they're nice and they have degrees and certificates. Not when we have 400 years of white supremacy. We cannot make the assumption that they're safe. Are you following me? And what I think happens to us is we send the children in and then we just hope they're not going to experience like what my teacher told me, what my guidance counselor told me at the tender age of 15 and 16. My white middle-aged woman who hated Black kids said I wasn't college material. I needn't even try. That's what I have 4 degrees. But what's important is my family laughed out loud at that, but some families didn't have a way, didn't know what that meant and believed it. And she was there till she, tenured, unless she ate small children, she didn't get fired. So how many people did she harm in our neighborhood, in our schools, because she went back to her neighborhood? And so what we recognize is this is not new. And we want to know why Johnny can't read. We want to know why Johnny and Amina is so angry. Really? And so I think that we need to pay attention as the big grown-ups. We have to hold folks accountable. No, I'm not going to blindly send my grandchildren into anybody's classroom without showing up and asking that teacher, quote, how are you going to mitigate any potential bias that will harm these children as a result of your awareness or lack of awareness thereof? And if that teacher says back to me, I don't know what you're talking about, I'm going to give her the data. Here it is. Disproportionate numbers. Here's what we have: a plethora. We have a preponderance of evidence that suggests that you might have bias. She or he says back to me, I'm not racist. I have some more data that suggests you might not know. And now, Miss Jones, Miss Smith, Mr. Wilson, you're going to have to tell me what you're going to do to mitigate any potential harm to these children right now. And what is not acceptable is I'm a nice person and I have a degree. Are you with me? That's what it means. It means showing up and saying, look, this song ain't about you. This song is about every single one of these children that I need to know are not going to be harmed because you don't realize you're a racist. You don't realize you have bias because it affects these little people for the rest of their lives. So we need to show up. And if people don't know how to show up, I will teach you how to show up. That's my responsibility as an elder. I'm going to do that. But you better know I got skin in the game. Dr. Joy shows up for free. Okay, because I got skin in the game. And I'm not going to let you do harm. Those children are being harmed in that preschool. Harmed. And beyond shutting that down, there needed to be someone that went in to positive racially socialized, right? We've learned that today. We need to deliberately go in there to make certain they're little persons were not harmed. And that we can mitigate what the larger society is assessing them. Mm-hmm. We can't just go, oh, I'm glad it's closed down. Are you with me?
Yes, we are with you. I am so thankful. The work that I do now is to train mental health consultants and preschool teachers how to incorporate parental racial socialization practices in the classroom and how to be emotionally supportive. And of course, I had to start much younger because these things that Dr. Degruy has been talking about are starting to happen in the preschool. And we now have data that show that infants and toddlers are even being victimized in schools. And so the work that I do is extension down from where you and Dr. Nichols have been working. And as a new scholar, I'm so humbled to be in this space with you all because I'm literally teaching mental health consultants, early childhood mental health consultants, how to incorporate racial socialization practices in the early childhood space.
And I want to say this to be very clear. Sometimes those teachers look just like us.
Sometimes they do indeed.
Don't get this confused. Yeah. Because we have been socialized to also do the same things.
Exactly.
We're in the same poisonous, system, which is poison at the root. So we've got to also root out the folks that post-traumatic that don't like anybody Black, that matter of fact, dislike Black people more than anybody white could.
Exactly.
So that going on too. And I don't care who you are. You don't get to be in front of my kids, period. I don't care what you look like.
points very nicely. Those are very nice points. I also, in my spare, not my spare time, but the other part of my job, I prepare teachers in early childhood education, and I teach them these same things because, like you said, we have to do it. We have to get there somewhere. I was told I wasn't college material, just as you were, and here I am now standing in front of students at the 11th ranked teachers college in the entire US, right? To teach these teachers that you have to use parental racial socialization in the early childhood space. It is important to neurodevelopment. It is important to brain development. So I'm so grateful for the work and the scholarship that you guys have put there before me, because I can draw on your work and incorporate it right into what I'm doing daily. And I appreciate it. We have about 5 minutes here to close this out. Open it up to Minister Brown. This has been your platform that you've shared for us and provided this space. Want to give you an opportunity to share any words today.
Well, I think one of the most important things that have been brought out is our worth and our value. And we can really see that in our ancient history. In a time when just about all human knowledge, I don't say a time when, but a time when all human knowledge was really brought through the African mind, before Africans were trapped in the ice age of Europe. And still, I would say those Neanderthals that were trapped in Europe and did not transform to Homo sapiens sapien. But the true human being is an African that has, I was just looking at a piece that they were looking at on the traits of the Neanderthal. The research pointed out that only Africans are pure human beings. But our value in knowing our history and knowing that all human knowledge really comes through the African mind gives us a worth that, when you internalize it, puts you at the very seat, a pinnacle of human development. And there are so many tests that have proven that. I mean, there's research on that. And we don't have time to go into it. But I so appreciate all of you, Dr. Nichols, Dr. Degruy, and Dr. Evandra. I can't thank you enough for your insight and your presentation on getting our folk and showing our people how to understand the environment that we're in and the path that we have to take to remove ourselves and save our children. And one of the greatest things that we can do is love one another. I mean, real love. Love is so powerful that it is transformative, not only of our environment, but of ourselves. So I'll close with that. I just want to thank you and let you know how much I appreciate you.
Thank you.
We appreciate you. Thank you. That ends our show for today. I'm hopeful that Dr. Nichols and Dr. Degruy will be able to come back, and we will have the time that we need for both of these scholars to be able to prepare and present to us the knowledge they feel that we can receive. So thank you all for joining us today.